If you ask me what is the most powerful and the most effective da'wah technique that you can teach me, that's the one that's in this episode. But what frustrates me is that nobody tries it. If you try it, you will get some amazing results, inshallah. You know what? I'm so frustrated, I'm not even going to do this episode. Forget it. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So this technique I've been teaching for a number of years, and if you ask me what is the most effective technique that you have and that I can use with an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Zoroastrian, this technique can be used with anybody, inshallah. And it's so simple. All you need is a paper, a pen, and a non-Muslim. Grab a paper right now, grab a pen, and grab the nearest non-Muslim. And follow this technique with them. And what's going to happen at the end, inshallah, is one of two things. Number one, they will get up after that gathering, after that meeting, they will get up a Muslim. Or two, they will get up non-Muslim, but they know for sure that Islam is the truth. They're just refusing to accept it. These are the two options, inshallah. And if you try it, you'll see that I'm not just trying to exaggerate or market this technique. All right? I always tell people, just try it. So let's go through it. Here's the argument for this technique. We're trying to see if the Prophet ﷺ is a genuine prophet. I should be able to show that to everybody. I should be able to, through analyzing his life, teachings, actions, sayings, to prove that to anyone on this planet. And if you are an imposter, it should be easy to show that and to prove that to anyone on the planet. That's it. That's the premise. So here we go. Get the pen, paper, and sit down. And by the way, even if you're not doing this technique, I strongly suggest using a pen and paper when you're giving da'wah. If you have like a one-on-one sit down, always use a pen and paper. Because number one, you can write down rules as you agree upon them. If the person gets trapped later on and they backtrack, you have it on paper. That's one. Number two, most human beings are visual and visualizers. So as you're talking, just write things down. Okay, one more time. Just try this. Give da'wah to someone across the table from you without a pen and paper, and do it with a pen and paper, and you'll see the difference. I've clearly seen the difference. Like sometimes I'll write, so Allah sent prophets. Just write the word prophets on the piece of paper. Then from that, draw an arrow, the books, and just keep scribbling. People are visual. Okay, going back to our exercise. And this exercise, we used to call it the senseless evasion of the Muhammad equation. What does that mean? Because it's an equation. If you add it up, it means that the Prophet, you come at the end, that the Prophet ﷺ is a genuine prophet. But people evade it, or they accept it. So that's what the title comes from. What do we do? How do we do this? We sit down with a non-Muslim, pen and paper, and I want to start by asking him a question, or her, to see two things. One, to gauge their level of knowledge. Two, to see how good they are in analysis, in ideas. So I know how much I have to hold their hand throughout the exercise. So number one, I ask them, imagine as we're sitting here right now, a person walks up to us and says, hey, you guys, listen up. I'm a prophet of Allah or a prophet of God. You need to follow me. You ask him now, how quickly could you determine if he's speaking the truth or falsehood, and what kind of questions would you ask them? And then let them go throughout the exercise. So they'll tell you, I'll ask him what's the name of the angel that comes to you. I'll ask them what is the number one message. All these questions to see if they're a genuine prophet. I'll ask them to perform a miracle. Maybe the person won't be very good at this exercise. Help them along. So now what you're doing, number three, because number one, you're testing their knowledge. Number two, you're seeing how good they are at analyzing things. And number three, you're getting them into that mode of analyzing. So that was step one. Step two, ask them if there was someone who was an imposter and someone who was a genuine prophet. What would be the difference between those two in behavior and in teachings and in actions? And let them list as many as they can. If they can only list 2 or 3, then you help them out. So the imposter would not practice what he would preach. The opposite for the genuine prophet. He would practice what he would preach. The imposter would not be able to offer miracles. That means the genuine prophet can offer miracles. The imposter might change his attitude, and his motivation will change and drop with different types of pressure put upon him and so on. He might leave the message altogether if pressured and so on and so forth. The imposter, the genuine prophet would stay firm no matter what happens and just keep going back and forth like this. The imposter would provide solutions that don't work. The genuine prophet, every time he offers a solution, it fixes society, it corrects ailments and so on and so forth. The genuine prophet would know some things that probably like things, prophecies in the future, or things about science that he couldn't have known. The imposter wouldn't have any of that, and just make this list nice and rich. Put whatever you want in it, put whatever they say in it that makes sense, put it in there. If they say something that doesn't make sense, kind of explain it away and so on. That was the next step. The step after that, now you're going to describe Arabia, and this is a very important step because we want them to understand that Arabia was a number of tribes living together, and sometimes they'd go to war against each other. And they would go to war for decades over silly things, a race, over horses, stuff like that. So Mecca being the center now, and even the word Mecca in English, it's also an English word. It means the center. You say, this is the Mecca of movies, this is the Mecca of bodybuilding, this is the Mecca of that. So it's a center. And Mecca was such a center that people would come from all over, and that would involve trade and all kinds of things. So now if a man in this environment is going to come up and attack the most beloved thing to them, I mean, they would kill each other for decades over a horse. Now he's going to attack their idols, and this what brings these people from all over the peninsula, and so it's related to their commerce and their business. What do you think they would do to this man? Now, according to the Prophet ﷺ, according to his situation, there are only two options, and there's no third. One, he was a genuine prophet. Two, he was an imposter. No third. Now, even if you say, what if he was someone who just cared about society, like Confucius, and he still means he's not a genuine prophet. Now, we're going to assume he's not a genuine prophet. So you're going to ask him. Now, if in this scenario, an imposter is going to pretend to be a prophet, what would be his motive to risk his life like that? And now in the sheet you write motives and you start to number them. Give me motives. Why would a man pretend to be a prophet, and he knows they're probably going to kill him if he attacks the most sacred thing to them, their religion and their idols? And you know, when you study criminology, if there's a crime, they look for two things: the murder weapon, and then they look for the motive. What's the motive? This is the narrative I'm going to give the judge or the jury. Why did he do it? So then you start to list the motives, and you let them write whatever. And I stress one more time, whatever they want is a motive, put it down. Maybe he did this for money, write down money. Maybe he did this for women, write down women. Luxury, write it down. Fame, write it down. Fortune, write it down. Whatever he says, write it down. One guy once told me maybe he's from outer space, write it down. An alien, write it down. Schizophrenic, write it down. Madman, write it down. You get the idea. Just keep writing down whatever they say. Now, next step. You with me? Just follow it just like this. Next step, we take the motives one by one, and based on the life and teachings and actions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we disprove each one of these motives. So for example, the first one, he wanted money. That's why he pretended to be a prophet. Okay, let's see if this is plausible from his life. Number one, he already had money. So why does he have to create a new religion and risk his life to get money? He already had money before becoming a prophet and became poor after becoming a prophet. Then later on, towards the end of his life, tens of thousands of gold and silver coins would come in his hand. He would distribute it all to the poor and go home with nothing. If he wanted money, then he would have taken that money. If he wanted money, his teachings would have been about money. The motive would be reflected in the teaching, Quran. If he's an imposter, he'd have to write the Quran. So if he wanted money, the Quran would be, bring your money to the Prophet. Give 1/5 of your this to the Prophet. Give 50% of your profit to the Prophet, right? We don't find that in the Quran. So I tell him, this is the rule. You tell him, I'm going to keep talking until you say you're convinced, then we move on to the next motive. And sometimes they love hearing about the Prophet so much that they don't tell you to stop. Then you tell them, are you convinced? Okay, cross it out, move to the next one. You wanted women? Go through the marriages of the Prophet ﷺ. One virgin, one unmarried. The rest, widowed. Some of them widowed twice, like Khadija radiallahu anha. Others All the rest, except for Aisha, widowed once. Many of them with children. Salama had 4 children, and so on and so forth. Like for example, Sauda bint Zam'a was his second wife, and she was, narrations go anywhere from 50, and some are a bit too high, up to 65 years old, but it's somewhere in her 50s, her age. And she wasn't necessarily celebrated for her beauty. So if you analyze his marriages, these are not the marriages of someone who's a womanizer, and so on and so forth. And here's a bigger question. Why would someone living in amongst the Quraysh in Mecca, who had no limit on marriages, fake a religion for the sake of getting married? Just get married. There was no limit. Yeah? But the Quran put a limit, and the Prophet couldn't get married after that. So interesting. Also, if he did it for money or for marriage or for women, the Quraysh offered him right in the beginning of his message. They came and said, look, if it's money you want, we'll give you money. And if it's women you want, we'll marry you to them. He could have said, hey, just saved me inventing a whole book. Wonderful. So go through the motives one by one. And the crazier they are, the motives the person tells you, the easier it is to refute them. Alien, so easy to refute. There was no green glow anytime in the desert. They went and found a boy there. No. We know his father, his grandfather, his aunt, his mother, his uncles. We know his tribe, his whole lineage. So there's nothing that said, oh, he was a stranger that came from nowhere. So cross that one out. Schizophrenic, we have thousands of whatever phrenics they're called, in the history of humanity, and never once one of them came with an entire justice system, an entire system of government. You tell me schizophrenics come up with fantastic religions that solve people's problems like that? Then I want to be a schizophrenic. Or he was a madman. And since when do madmen come up with systems like this? So cross them out. Do this with all the motives. After that, there are 2 ways you can go. One way is you can give also additional information why he was not an imposter. For example, the science that's in the Quran, the consistency of the Quran. And we'll deal with these when we do the episode on the Quran, inshallah. All these things, the knowledge of the future that's in the Quran, the mention of prophets in the Quran, all this shows that if he were an imposter trying to build himself up to live out that motive, the Quran wouldn't be talking about that. It will be talking about him, and his motive will be reflected in his teachings. And so many things that are just amazing. Watch the episode on the Quran. I'll put them all there, inshallah. Okay? Now, and from here, we can, from this point now, ask them, who was this man? Was he a genuine prophet or not? The first time I ever used this technique was a Muslim wanted to marry an atheist girl. He said, can you prove Allah exists? We proved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence just through analyzing the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'll conclude by saying, one time I did this with a co-worker. And we did an extra exercise. I listed all the skills of the Prophet ﷺ, and a huge list of skills. And if you consider, like, he wrote the Quran, that means he would have to know about oceanography and all these sciences. In the end, I asked the co-worker, I said, is it possible that one human being could do all this? And the guy said, I think he was the reincarnation of all the great minds into one person. I said, what is more plausible, that or that he was a genuine prophet of Allah? And the man put his head down and he said, he was probably a genuine prophet of Allah. So the person either becomes Muslim or he's convinced that it's the truth, but he won't take his shahada. Try it and you will see bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. Thank you for listening. Sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.